Here in Washington is the journalist and author of Predator, The Secret Origins of the Drone Revolution, Richard Whittle. With us from London is the co-director of the Association of British Muslims, Talib Hussein Varsi. And also joining us here is David Gartenstein-Ross. He is Senior Fellow with the Foundation of Defence of Democracies. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. First of all, Richard, you wrote the book on the Predator drone. Just how revolutionary is these drone technology? And now that the US is going to be exporting them for sale, is that a game changer?
Well, the Predator was revolutionary because it was the first endurance unmanned aerial vehicle, as it's technically called. You know, prior to the Predator, which was first flown in 1994, drones were basically a niche technology. The military were very uninterested. They were sort of like model airplanes that would have cameras in them. And they were attempted in various configurations.
So what changed things?
What changed things was a very interesting man, an Israeli inventor and engineer named Abraham Karam, who left Israel Aircraft Industries in the 1970s, immigrated to the United States, and like all great American inventors, went to work in his garage and came up with the basic design that allows for an airplane that can fly as much as 20 or 40 hours. And this was a revolutionary step. This was what gave the military this eye in the sky that's so important.
And of course used by the CIA and the Defense Department, largely in the Middle Eastern War on Terror. Talib, I just want to bring you in from London. From your perspective, what has this technology done? And what are the problems with it as the US prepares to export this around the world, especially to the Middle East?
What I would say is the genie is out of the bottle. It is no more a domain where America will control the drone sale or industry or usage. Now this technology is available worldwide. As you were saying earlier, it's a growing business. It's a business with, some say 2.3, but I would say more than $3 billion industry. And it is no more America will have the right over it to say, because in about 10, 15 years' time, it will be China who will lead the industry right across the world. They are already, as you say, selling it to various countries in the Middle East and other parts of the world. The only problem is we have to understand it is not like the aviation industry where you can set a rule and laws of landing and takeoffs. It is totally different environment altogether. It is where whoever has it has the joystick or the control console in his hand. It's like a child holding the toy. No regulation is there to control that, and it will not be possible for America to dictate an international law to control it. Therefore, what we have to look at very carefully is how are the people going to use it? Number one, for surveillance purposes. Number four, for target assassination. Number five, for deterrent and as a use of weapon of delivering arsenal and payloads.
Thank you for that. David, is the genie out of the bottle? And has American use of these armed drones thus far created a precedent that could actually create blowback on the US?
The genie's out of the bottle in the sense that this isn't going to be something that's the exclusive domain of the United States moving forward. But I disagree with Tariq that you're not going to have any sort of regulation on this. In fact, there's been a general move over time to regulate the rules of warfare more and more. Now, rather than this being an issue of drones, I actually would frame this as being a different issue, an issue of violent non-state actors. Normally when we think of warfare, war is between several different nation states. And you have multiple Geneva Conventions and other conventions that codify rules of state-to-state warfare in international law. Traditionally, when you have a state fighting against citizens within its borders, it's thought of as being an internal issue within that state. Whereas now you have very powerful violent non-state actors that operate transnationally. And this is why, for example, when the Gitmo facility was set up, there was this big debate, does it fit under the Geneva Convention? That wasn't because, I mean, and this is not to say that everything with Gitmo was good, but it wasn't because they wanted to, say, torture people there. Rather, the reason why that debate came up is because Al-Qaeda was not, and the Taliban were not signatories to the Geneva Convention. Now, the question is, how do you better regulate the rules of war with respect to violent non-state actors? Because this is something really that the international community hasn't dealt with on this kind of scale previously.
That's right, Richard. Do you think that the actual practice, the use of drones is actually ahead of the regulation?
Oh, absolutely. The society is really scrambling. All societies are scrambling to catch up with this technological tsunami that is sweeping over us. I disagree a little bit with Talib because I don't think that the small drones are as much a threat as some people might imagine.
What if a drone is shot down, though, by another nation? This is a possibility as they proliferate. Is that an act of war? Could we see, the use of drones in different theaters where perhaps you wouldn't send pilots? If that's shot down, is that an act of war? Could we see escalation?
Well, that depends on the circumstances, on where the drone is. But the point I think it's important to keep in mind is that militarily, while the drones the size of the Predator or the Reaper, which carries 4 Hellfire missiles and 2 250-pound bombs, are very useful for targeted killings, the way the CIA has used them, they're not that great a military tool as a way to deliver firepower. And that's why manned aircraft are doing almost all of the airstrikes that are going on right now in Syria and Iraq against ISIS.
So let me go to London. Talib, what's wrong with using these drones to target assassination terrorists who don't fit neatly into the rules of war?
Third day after President Obama took on office, the drones were used with his consent, and the target was in border area of Pakistan, where a whole family of innocent, bystanders were wiped out. Few hours later, a second attack by CIA took place. Another innocent lives were lost. You must understand, we are not talking about big payload drones all the time. You see, for example, you take the Al-Qaeda or ISIS. They can use these technology is available now to university graduates and students. You do not need a town like Seattle or Boeing factories to build small drones. And tomorrow, in not too long a time, there won't be any suicide bombers. They will use these drones as humans who will go and cause devastation in places like that. So the picture is actually getting worse.
That's the point, actually, that I was
trying
to make, that terrorists don't actually need to use the modern drone. You could pack plastic explosives into a model aircraft of the sort that was prevalent 20 years ago,
and we've seen over Paris,
the White House fence or over the Champs-Elysees.
Yeah, you actually had a plot to do that to the Pentagon, where the perpetrator was arrested within the past few years. And the technological scenario that I know people in the security industry worry about with respect to drones is a number of small drones, let's say 40 to 50 very small drones, flying into the propellers or flying into a plane as it takes off. A bird can take down a plane. So small drones could do the same thing. It does create a number of different technological problems.
Let's go back to the military export of these. Do you see them as a stabilizing force, especially the countries that want to buy them? Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Pakistan, David, or potentially destabilizing?
It's both. I think that in most cases it's more stabilizing than destabilizing, but it can be destabilizing as well. I mean, as Talib said, innocent people do get killed in drone strikes. That being said, drones are probably often going to be used for surveillance purposes rather than to deliver killing blows. And secondly, in a lot of cases when they'll be used to deliver killing blows, it'll be in areas where you don't have families operating. For example, Tunisia is a country that I think may have drones within the next 10 years. And the area in which it's fighting militants is the Jebel Shambi Mountains, which is in western Tunisia. That's an area which the state has declared to be off limits, and so the people traveling through there tend to be jihadist groups. You don't have families that are going through the Jebel Shambi Mountains. So drones there, I think, would be a stabilizing force. But we have to understand that the problem of violent non-state actors, it's a long-term problem. It's not one where we're close to wiping out organizations like Al-Qaeda. And so one of my big critiques of the U.S. with respect to its use of the drone program is it has always exaggerated the degree to which Al-Qaeda is on the verge of strategic defeat, and so has overused drones with not enough regard for both innocent life and the strategic consequence of killing innocents.
Yes, a drone isn't just operating in a vacuum, Richard, is it? That you need command and control systems, you need satellite, you need information on the ground to actually make sure it's accurate as well. That's sometimes overlooked when everyone thinks it's a very simple, cheap technology to use.
Right, it is, and it's much more complex than buying a couple of airplanes, as you said. And the other thing that people don't think about very much, the way the United States uses the Predator and the Reaper, the U.S. Air Force operates them from bases in the United States. And that requires a global remote control system that is not as simple as subscribing to satellite TV. They send the signals to Europe by fiber optic cable, and that's the only way they can get those signals to the drone and back quickly enough to fly it and fire its weapons accurately. So I don't think that there are a lot of countries in the world who are going to be able to duplicate that system. China could be one.
Fascinating conversation, and that will continue. We need to take a break now. More of our conversation after this. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about the U.S. decision to sell lethal drones to some allies in the Middle East and beyond. Joining us here in Washington is author of Bin Laden's Legacy While We're Still Losing the War on Terror, David Gartenstein-Ross. With us in London is Director for Interfaith Relations at the Association of British Muslims, Talib Hussein Warsi. And also here with us in the studio is Richard Whittle. He's with the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars. Thank you so much for coming back. China is starting to export this technology as well. The US is going to. Others will get involved. What's the global marketplace like, Richard, for this type of technology?
Well, it's quite dynamic, and it's growing. There are an estimated 80 countries in the world who have drones of some kind or another, or who are developing or acquiring them, and the market is very tempting. Israel is the world's leading exporter of drones. I think I understand China is exporting drones too. I don't actually have the details on that.
David, who's going to be winning this race in the future, do you think?
It's hard to predict. The U.S. is well positioned. Obviously, Israel's well positioned. China's well positioned. You could have other countries that decide to specialize in this as an industry, but right now you have a few countries that have a leap on everyone else.
Talib, you were talking before the break about this market being around $2.6 billion at the moment, but I've seen projections that see that doubling and tripling over time.
It's going to be far bigger figure than that, because you see, like President Obama has made his choice. It's robotic warfare is his choice that he has made, and robotic warfare is going to stay. It's not going to disappear. In fact, it's going to increase. Therefore, the values of drones is going to increase, and the sale value. But the thing is this, China actually has an edge over America and others, as number one, it can produce far cheaper price-wise. The price tag is a very important fact when you start going to sell in the open market. Then also is the technology, and the Chinese have caught up with the technology very fast and rapidly, and they're 3 different type of drone system, medium, large, and small, are already in the market. More than that is, you see, there's a danger behind it. These little drones can carry payloads of biological weapons, chemical weapons, even dirty bombs can be carried with them. So the future of robotic warfare, which as it is called, the drone is going to play not a small but bigger and bigger role in this world.
All good points. Richard, I just want to ask you, this cost factor, is that a big attractive proposal for countries looking to modernize their military? I mean, they're a lot cheaper than F-16s or Abrams tanks, right?
Well, but they actually aren't. And actually, I would throw a little bit of cold water on what Mr. Warsi was just saying, because it's quite an expensive proposition, actually, to operate drones, at least the way the United States does. To keep a drone in the air for 24 to 40 hours, you actually have to have 3 or 4 aircraft. You have to have a ground control station that's quite complicated. You have to have satellite data links. You have to have crews that generally run 55 people or more, and that doesn't include the intelligence analysts who have to interpret the video that comes back. One of the big problems for the U.S. right now, they don't have enough drone pilots or enough intelligence analysts to actually, they're drinking from the fire hose in the amount of video they get of the drones that they have. So
this sounds like
it's not as simple as it may seem.
This sounds like a mini military-industrial complex ready. You've got to have the software, you've got to have the satellites, you've got to have everything. David?
You need all of that, and let's also be clear about what drones are and what they aren't. They are not a replacement for F-16s. I mean, this argument has come up time and again. Imagine when all the world has drones and then the U.S. has to worry about it. And there are indeed many ways we have to worry about it. We talked about the possibility of drones being used in a variety of terrorist attacks.
As Talib was just saying, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that given that we see so little in the way of chemical or biological attacks, and dirty bombs, I'm not as concerned about that. But I think that there are a variety of ways it can be used in terrorist attacks. But you know, I think that we should understand they're not a substitute for Air Force, right? If you had an F-16 against 40 drones, I mean, the end result would be 40 drones on the ground in smoldering ruin.
Exactly. If I could just interject that they're quite easy. Even the Predator and the Reaper, who are the armed drones the U.S. flies, are quite easy to shoot down. Yeah. And they don't carry very much. The Hellfire missile that the Predator carries weighs between 13 and 45 pounds, the warhead, depending on which variety is used. The smallest bomb the United States Air Force drops, usually from a manned aircraft, is 250 pounds, and they go up to 2,000 pounds. That's quite a bit of difference of firepower. So David is exactly right. They're not going to replace air forces.
Right. Right now they're effective against violent non-state actors. Now, I think with the next generation of drones, like 1 or 2 generations down, it's possible that you'll get drones that are the equivalent of fighter planes. I mean, I've talked to drone pilots who are both in the U.S. Air Force and also the U.S. military, who think that in future generations you actually can have drones that are pretty effective. But right now they're not. Right now they do a good job at striking terrorist targets. They do a terrible job of state-to-state warfare.
Even though, Talib, I want you to answer this, even though the attractive nature of these is there's no pilot, but you don't think they could be used in state-to-state warfare like David? Do you think they're going to be used for just terrorist operations and the like?
Yes, you see, the great possibility is already on the table. As I said right in the beginning, the genie is out of the bottle. The thing is this: we must realize that China has already produced a prototype, stealth drones that can avoid detection, and America has got that as well. But more important to that is China is already developing, we are talking about the drones of the skies, China is already developing, and others are also in competition, developing the drones on the waters, on the seas as well. So it is a robotic technology as a whole. We must not look just drone as one entity. It's a whole picture that we have got to look, because in 15, 20 years' time, the idea is to take, within inverted comma, humans out and robotics in, and that is the way, that is the choice Obama has made to go for robotic, and other countries are catching up. It's an industry which is going to rapidly escalate, and it is the regulation, as we were talking earlier, is very difficult to bring in.
David, you disagree?
I think that getting humans out, that's not going to happen for some time. And one thing I would point to when we talk about drones is that you do have budget issues. I mean, the U.S. military, it's not happening right now, but at some point it's going to have serious cutbacks.
Yeah, because the U.S. military basically outspends the next 9
Right,
countries.
And so when you're talking about taking humans completely out of the picture, given that right now drones are not a substitute for state-to-state aerial warfare, I wonder how long it will be before we get to that next generation of drones. It could be a little bit longer than people anticipate, basically because of budgetary issues.
Because the research and development is so expensive, Richard?
Well, it is, and actually it's interesting to note that the Obama administration's plan was to cut the number of Reapers that it was buying this year until the war with ISIS heated up. And that has increased the demand to have drones flying what they call combat air patrols, providing surveillance. So, so as a result, they have increased the number that they're asking Congress to finance.
I think I want to widen this out and say, what are the potential pitfalls of drone use by increasing number of countries around the world, given the fact that they haven't been regulated, that there are these concerns?
I actually think that it's not that different from what we've dealt with for a long time. I mean, for a long time, you've gotten different kinds of technology that provide greater lethal potentials for the state and are seen as potential game changers. In some ways, they are. But overall warfare remains the same. So the machine gun, for example, that was an absolute game changer. But we don't think of a need for a separate rule of war for machine guns, because it's just a tool, a lethal tool.
Talib, just a lethal tool?
No, it is not a lethal tool. It is far, what you say, more useful in the eyes of the Pentagon and the CIA than just a useful tool. You see, Obama wanted the, what you call, Pentagon to take over the covert operation that were done with the use of what you call the drones. CIA put its dug its heel in, and so, no, CIA must be involved, because CIA also sees the great potential and future, the way drone will be used in various covert operations across the world, not just in Iraq, not just in Syria, not just in Yemen, not just in Somalia, but also in new places like Ukraine and others. It's going to be a very vital tool in the hands of the CIA and the Pentagon.
But that's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying, though, right? Machine guns are used all over as well. I mean, that doesn't mean the fact that it would be used widely doesn't mean it's any different than other tools of warfare that we have that are used both overtly and covertly.
I was just going to say, Nathan, that I see it a little differently. The CIA, actually, as I write in my book, the CIA did not want to use the armed predator when it was initially proposed back in 2000, 2001, because the director at the time, George Tenet, felt it would be a bad policy for the CIA to control a military weapon. What's happened since is actually that the use of targeted killings using the Predator and the Reaper has become sort of a default policy for lack of a more sophisticated, more nuanced counterterrorism policy. As Leon Panetta said when he was the director of the CIA, for them it's the only game in town. But it's not the game they really wanted to play.
Fascinating discussion, and we'll learn more about this as these exports continue and the technology continues to evolve. Talib in London, thank you very much. Richard here, as well as David, thank you so much. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation does continue online. Join us on CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CCTV_America. I'm Nathan King in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us.